Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. Thank you for joining us. I'm Noelle Skadinsky. I'm the editorial director of GIE Media's Cannabis Group, which includes Cannabis Business Times, Cannabis Dispensary, Hemp Grower Magazine, the newly launching Hemp Grower Conference this year, and the Cannabis Conference, which will be returning in person in August 24th through 26th this year. Before I introduce today's guests, just a quick couple of housekeeping notes. There will be a question box that you should see on your screen where you can submit questions, and we'll leave time at the end of the interview for questions for our guests, and but you can submit them anytime throughout the interview. And then if you have to leave for any time and want to view the entire interview later, you'll get an email with a link to the archived interview so you can view it later. And one last thing, I would like to thank our sponsor, Fohse, Future of Horticultural Engineering and Science, for making this interview possible. Fohse is a leading creator of industrial LED lighting for indoor and greenhouse grows, and for both single level and vertical growing environments. And you can find out more about Fohse and its lighting technology at fohse.com. And you'll also see a question from our sponsor pop up during the interview today. I'll mention that again. If you would take just a quick second to answer it, that would be fantastic. So now I am pleased to welcome Kevin Kuethe and Marlin Malice of Lume Cannabis Company. Welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for joining. So just quick background on Lume. Lume is a Michigan-based vertically integrated cannabis business operating 50,000 square feet of unique state-of-the-art indoor cultivation, along with 20 acres of outdoor cultivation. I hope that's accurate. It was 20 or 25. Just want to make sure. And then
24,
an
close enough.
Okay, 11,000 square foot greenhouse for starter plants, which is operating for the first time this spring. And the company is also in the process of completing its expansion into an additional 85,000 square foot cultivation space. And Lume also has 15 or so retail locations throughout Michigan, constantly expanding. So hope that number is accurate as well. I know when we talked, you had some that were coming online soon.
Oh yeah, opening more all the time.
So I just want to give a quick background on Kevin and Marlin. So Kevin joined Lume in 2018 as Vice President of Cultivation, and he designed and built the 50,000 square foot cultivation and solventless extraction facility. And his career in cannabis prior to joining Lume is quite extensive, and so extensive I had to limit this to just a few key highlights. So he started out at Bloom in 2011 in Arizona, where he oversaw cultivation and processing operations as COO. He later designed and built a 950 light cultivation facility and extraction lab under the name Kind. Kevin's also owner and managing partner at Blossom Group, a cultivation and processing facility in Las Vegas. And in 2016, he joined GB Sciences as COO and oversaw ground-up development of 2 state-of-the-art cultivation facilities, including a tissue culture lab, processing lab, and a $6 million greenhouse. And one last thing I wanted to include, he designed a $12 million CGMP industrial hemp biomass processing facility in Tennessee. Marlin joined Lume in January 2019 as General Manager of Cultivation and helped finalize design and construction of Lume's cultivation and production facility and currently manages operations. He also facilitates R&D that contributes to the development of proprietary equipment and processes that give the company a competitive advantage. Prior to joining Lume, Marlin served a dual role as cultivation manager and critical equipment specialist for GB Sciences as well. And one really part of your career that I find particularly interesting is Marlin also worked in subsea construction for Morrison Energy, where he specialized in the use of hyperbaric chambers that sustain human life under great barometric pressure for the purpose of reducing the physiological effects of being in deep sea environments. That is not a job you hear of every day. So,
not your typical 9 to 5.
No. So again, welcome Kevin and Marlin. So pleased to have you here.
Thank you.
Nice to be here.
Pleasure.
So I guess I'm going to ask the first question. Liz, if you want to maybe share, we're going to share some images of inside their facility while we're talking for just a couple minutes. So you're getting the new greenhouse up and running, and you're undergoing an additional expansion. Will you tell us a bit about that, what you have going on there?
Yeah, so we have a really large need for oils. The demand in Michigan is growing, and we have a really difficult time keeping inventory in the stores that we have currently. So, part of our future plans, we knew that we had to be producing oil on a commercial scale. So outdoors is the way to go. So we designed and are building currently a 24-acre outdoor plot. It's just over 1 million square feet. And just short of a 12,000 square foot greenhouse. The purpose of the greenhouse will be to pre-vegetate, propagate and vegetate the plants before we move them out to field. This is our first time doing an outdoor grow here in Michigan, and we're doing some experiments, different types of grow medium. We're doing raised pots, some plastic culture, some similar techniques and styles that we've done with commercial hemp before. So that's our goal, and it looks like we're going to make it to field by end of May, early June. So we're excited about that. As far as our indoor expansion goes, it's 85,000 square foot on the ground level. We've got 70,000 on the second level, and it's connected to our current facility. So it brings our total square footage from both facilities almost to 250,000 square feet. And we are still just trying to catch up with demand. We have made a stakehold in the Michigan marketplace, with really high quality and consistency behind our flower and our product, and the intent that we put in and the energy and effort into making sure that that's a perfect strain and the strain has had a perfect life. And by the time someone gets it at the retail, it's the first time human hands ever touched that product. So we designed and expanded the current cultivation with a lot of these techniques and end results in mind. And although it looks a little different than the current cultivation facility, the magic is in the mechanical controls and along with the lighting technology, and that we built a test room here in our current facility to prove some of this new technology. We call it Grow Room 10 because it's our 10th grow room here. It's a 3,000 square foot room, and we are, using technology in mechanical systems and custom irrigation systems. We use a custom HMI control board that basically houses every control that we could want, from CO2 to lighting and airspeed and irrigation and everything all in one unit. It's been an awesome journey. We got to prove the concept here. And that is what will be basically our entire expansion, is that same technology over and over. And some of the photos you're going through now show the existing, and then some of them show the new expansion. You can kind of tell the difference between the just the visuals and the aesthetics of it.
Great. Thank you for that. So we'll touch on some of the things you mentioned coming up. So you've achieved some pretty significant harvests. Can you share some of those numbers with us?
Sure. Yeah, we've come a long way. It's a progression, and all the thought and foresight and engineering that goes into it has produced us some pretty stellar results. And I can share those in terms of both pounds per light and grams per square foot, since those are mostly the most wide used metrics. So in terms of usable biomass, which biomass meaning that anything that has THC in it, so not without the stalks and stems and fan leaves. On the high side, we've done about 109 grams a square foot, which equates to 6.7 pounds of light. The flour that we've derived out of that, which means packageable flour, on the high side of the yield, is done 81.4 grams a square foot, producing roughly 4.7 pounds of light. So that's on the high side. And I mentioned that to say that everything has to be right. The mechanics have to be right. The light has to be right. The grow team has to be right. The protocol has to be right. But the other big piece of that is obviously genetics. So genetics vary greatly from one genetic to another. Not all genetics are going to produce that type of yield. And we have a very large profile of genetics, and not all of those produce that type of yield. So when we say that on our high end, that's our killers, right? Those are the ones that produce that type of yield. You intentionally want to have some type of strain diversity, so not every room is going to be producing that all the time, but just an important note to make, that all of those pieces have to fit right in order to get those types of figures.
Okay, sure, great. So you touched on this a little bit, and we talked previously, and you mentioned that Lume is so data-driven in its decision-making that it's almost a data tech company that grows cannabis. Can you talk about how technology and data play a significant role in your operations and in your decision-making, and do you consider that a major factor in your yields and quality?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because we do kind of consider ourselves a science-based data tech company that loves to grow marijuana. And all of those things combined make us really good at what we do. But data and technology really are two things that kind of get left in the dust on small scale grows, and when you go to a commercial scale, when you're doing anything on a commercial scale, it's good to allow data to drive your decisions. And in cannabis, it's a difficult thing to track because not only are there so many variables within the data, but there's also so many data points to collect, just within a room with environmental controls, for example. There's so many different variables there to collect, and what data means what. How do you aggregate that and collect that? And what we've noticed is that where the real value comes in is over long periods of time and collecting data, and things that a grower or a trimmer or maybe a harvest manager might not really recognize or notice in a plant, but over time we see, oh, maybe using this nutrient type or this schedule with lighting or this different lighting style, we might get a 3% higher rate bud ratio to trim. And that's something that we can aggregate over time. And with a company of size, that's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. So to be able to make decisions off data like that has really driven us in the direction of not only being extremely efficient, but also being able to consistently create really high quality products, and that's been a major determination and factor of not only what we're doing here now, but also of the expansion facility. And one of the big pieces of that is you got to understand and really believe that you don't know everything. Sometimes that's a difficult pill for people to swallow, especially if you've been successful in the cannabis industry before. I hear a lot of people say that, well, this works for me. I want to keep doing this. It works. And, that's okay. And it might work right now. But the issue is over time, if you keep that mindset, then that eventually you're going to get left in the dust. Technology changes, things get better. I like to look at it like gas cars versus electric. Yeah, gas cars are amazing. Everybody was on board with them before. When electric first came out, it was a little skeptical, and now it's the whole industry is going to change. And it's obviously much more efficient. And to me, cannabis and technology is the same way. It's almost LED lighting to HPS or HID. It's really similar. So we do put a lot of emphasis on that. We enter our problems and understand things, with humility and knowing that we don't know it all, and accessing people. We look for help all the time. I'm in constant contact with several different universities, agricultural departments, and people, who have fantastic backgrounds, to be able to bounce ideas off of and work through problems and solutions. And we're really pioneering an industry here and discovering and breaking new ground every day. So it's extremely fun and educating, but also very humbling as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. We track everything from propagation to the time what flower actually makes the shelf. It is a lot of data points, and that's what's the big cumbersome thing about it, is there's so many data points to collect and there's so much information coming at you that it is just a monumental task trying to aggregate and translate the information into something that's usable. And just the grow controls in a room, that's only one part of the process. There's so many other things to be considered. But for example, the types of, or just the sheer amount of information we collect, he made mention of our prototype grow room, where we actually built the controls and custom built the controls and software that control the room and do the recording. It controls dozens of different data points, which is far and beyond just your normal light and CO2 and temperature and humidity. That's something that everybody does. But there's many other things that people don't even consider that this software and the controls are actually recording. And it's about 100 actual data points a minute, which equates to over 150,000 data points a day in a single grow cycle. That's over 9 million data points that we have to aggregate and translate into something that's usable to help drive our decision making. And that's only one part of the process. So if you can imagine the rest of the cultivation and the rest of the company, the rest of the facility, taking that and aggregating all the information for each step of the process, it is a massive task. So a lot goes into custom building software and engineering mechanicals that actually fit our business practice and enable us to do that kind of thing.
We'll have to do a whole nother interview at some point on all that data that you're collecting. I have a gazillion questions on that.
It's the secret sauce. I don't know if we can tell you everything.
Well, maybe a little bit, but so you mentioned science and applying that to cultivation, and we talked earlier, and you had some really interesting things that you were doing, the actual science of the plant and how that plays into your operations and kind of the methods that you're using to, help aid in the development of the plant and your yields and all of that. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Like everything else, there's levels to it, right? And there's depth. So something like vapor pressure deficit, all commercial growers should know what vapor pressure deficit is. And, knowing what it is and knowing that you should be within that range is one thing, but really understanding what that means and how, the atmospherical pressure is actually measured in the room, what that does to the plant in specific stages of its life, and how you can increase the evapotranspiration of a plant to increase the metabolic rate, really diving into those things and finding how they're correlated and relate to each other is where science really comes in for us, and going to that next level, peeling that next layer off. The other side of it is we do all of our own nutrients from scratch. So we custom mix everything. We're using research, agricultural grade salts. And one of the ways to perfect that is obviously by doing continual tests. We do petiole tests and leaf tests on plants, sap analysis continually, throughout its life to make sure it's just optimal the entire time. We have a tissue culture lab here. We have an R&D facility in the expansion where we can do both plant sexing, synthetic seeds, tissue culture from callus. We can do meristematic tissue. I mean, we're like I said, we're a science-based company. We live in that, and we love that portion of our facility and of our job here. So there's a lot of emphasis behind the science. What I would really push is that peeling off that next layer of not just knowing the terms and knowing the charts, but really diving into what they mean has had a major effect and played a difference for us.
Yeah, and I would say too that there's a lot of things that are come out of a box that come off the shelf that you can just install in your facility. And I think the major difference with us is, we might take the base of some type of technology and we'll configure it to our business practice. I mean, and that goes for everything here. So if it doesn't fit perfectly or if there's something a little bit off, we're not going to leave it like that. I mean, we custom design and tweak and build everything to fit to our cultivation, to our business practice. And that's another one of those things that I say is the secret sauce. We have an incredible team that gives us the capability of being able to do that. So it's not just, this isn't an out of the box cultivation. Everything that we've got, everything that we have here, everything that we built here, we have put our own stamp on. And that's what makes a lot of these things proprietary. You can walk through the facility and at the surface level, you're like, oh, okay, I recognize that. And I've seen one of those, but you don't know the changes that we've made, all the R&D that's gone into making these little tweaks for these pieces of machinery.
Yeah, a lot of people say growing's a science, but you're really living it over there.
Definitely.
So I want to just I have a few questions from the sponsor. We also have a poll coming. It should be able to come up soon. Again, just a quick question. If those of you listening in wouldn't mind answering it, that would be really helpful. So these are questions from Fohse, our sponsor. So your team is one of a growing number of cultivators that we've seen pushing the limits of cannabis production. So what role have your light fixtures played in your ability to break harvest records?
Well, you know, it's played a major difference. To me, when I first started cultivating, I recognized right away that the HIDs, you know, high intensity discharge lights, were a massive waste with the heat coming off of them and all of the mechanical engineering you have to put behind an infrastructure in a room just to cool those lights. The technology is 40 or 50 years old now. You know, I knew that that had to be one of the first things to go. And the problem was, you know, being a cultivator and perfecting HID lighting, you find a business model that works. And you're not going to just take that light down and put up an LED unless it does exactly what that did or better. You know, you're not going to sacrifice. So for me, it took years of testing new lights and trying lights and different LEDs. And I had to run them all the way through flower. I usually did it twice, 2 cycles. With cannabis, usually you want to run things twice just to get the full data. It's not always going to be the same. So what I noticed was that with the majority of LEDs I was using, all this common problems were happening, right? You had really larvae under buds, and only the very top of the canopy was getting dense and looked like healthy, you know, premium flower, until we put up one of these Fohse lights. And what happened was we were able to actually exceed our HIDs. It didn't take very long for us to figure that out, but you know, there's more behind it than just swapping out a light. You know, there's a little infrastructure change and prepping your environmental controls. When you change such a major component to a room like that, it's you know, it takes a little planning. But we have noticed, you know, our yields definitely are up. And the other benefit is that the efficiency on converting energy into light is much better with the LEDs, and it also allows us to not throw such a massive heat source over the canopy and helps us preserve more terpenes. So, you know, we've noticed a raise in our terpenes and in our yields. It's been pretty great.
Yeah, I mean, we've done a tremendous amount of R&D on lights. I mean, there's times when you'd walk in our facilities over the years and there's light fixtures that have tape on them that are restricting, you know, certain diodes or, you know, or whatever the case is, trying to manipulate the spectrum. And we've had them in and out, and we weren't going to jump to something else until we were sure. But, you know, another thing to make note of, and to go to your question as far as pushing the limits, you know, the fixtures that we have are actually a higher wattage than the fixtures that we had in before. But what it's doing is, since it's converting the light more efficiently, we're able to use that. We're able to utilize that energy, or the same amount of energy, and produce more light energy for the plants to feed on. And when you make that type of transition, that's also just not a plug and play either. So now you have plants that are growing harder and faster, and so now you have to manipulate your nutrient recipe. And so prior to what Kevin touched on before, we did a lot of testing internally to figure out what we have to configure as far as nutrients, as far as the rest of the mechanics, as far as the rest of the facility, just to tailor it to be able to accommodate that kind of light, you know. So all of those things have to be in place. One thing changes, it's a domino effect. There's many other things that have to fall in line that you have to change as well in order to accommodate that change, and for whatever it is. It doesn't matter if it's light or nutrient or whatever the case. So.
But for you, that's obviously all been worthwhile.
Definitely.
Okay, so you know, despite the higher costs of LED, I mean, some people definitely, I think, oh, it's more expensive. I don't know, you know, if I need LED. But the shift toward LEDs is definitely gaining momentum. We do state of the lighting industry reports every year, and we've just seen the adoption of the technology growing and growing. But in your experience, what does the ROI period look like after you purchase like the LED lighting system?
Yeah, you know, the ROI is a kind of a difficult number to pinpoint because of the constantly changing market for cannabis. As your business just a commercial cultivation where you're selling bulk wholesale? Are you fully vertically integrated? Your margins are definitely different. You know, so to me, you're in that 12 to 18 month range typically. Not just because of yield and quality, but you also have to consider you're not changing bulbs. You know, I think these have a 50,000, 60,000 hour life or something. So, you know, that's years and years and years without going for a bulb change. So that makes a big impact as well. You know, we did an ROI on one of our rooms here, for example, with the LEDs, and it was an 18 month turnaround for us.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people out there that are still using the HIDs, or that are still using those types of lights, and they're tried and true, and that's okay. They're going to be, it's what everyone used for a long time, and you can get a good yield out of those. But like Kevin was saying, after a couple runs, those bulbs start to die, and it has an effect on your yield. So that's an ongoing cost that's associated with that. So that's one of the downsides. And just to make mention too of LEDs, they're versatile, and the versatility is one of the things that gives it its big advantage. But it's also something that can be a killer if the grower isn't well informed enough in how to use the LEDs in the light spectrum. If you manipulate the spectrum incorrectly, you can have a negative effect on your yield. So that's one thing that we spent a lot of time figuring out and getting right, is making sure that the spectrum during the right periods of the plant's life is correct. If you stick an LED light up in your room and you don't have any idea of spectrum and what types of spectrum it needs during certain parts of the plant's life, you might have a negative effect.
And light intensity, you can adjust the percentages on these lights at any time, all the way, 0 to 100%. And so what we noticed over time was, even though you have an LED that might be a 1500 watt fixture, if you have a grow room with an HID that's 1000 watt, that's going to be on 1000 watts for the majority of flower. When in a room with an LED, you're slowly increasing that all the way up to 80%, 90% at the end of the cycle. It ends up being much more efficient than 1000 watt at the end, anyways.
Yeah, but the LED is definitely a level up. As long as you know how to utilize it correctly, it can put you up and over.
Okay. So how many cultivars are you growing typically at one time?
In the tissue culture lab, we've got over 100 cultivars in the facility, well over 100. We do cryogenic freezing with our synthetic seeds, so we can take them out of the freezer at any time and rehatch them. But typically we're cultivating between 30 and 35 strains at once. We have 20 grow rooms here shortly, and we'll be having at least 2 per room, plus our R&D room. We continue to pheno hunt and do genetic research to really start producing premium, high quality, stable genetics that don't exist other places. So that's a big focus of ours as well.
Okay, great. So, I know that through Lume's retail locations, you're selling a pretty wide variety of Lume cultivated and processed products, from flower to the large selection of solvent-free concentrates, bubble hash, rosin. Does the company's end product offerings play into which cultivars you're growing and how you grow them?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that's a big reason. There's especially for things like our solventless products, there's certain strains that are much more, or that people want much more, that produce a much better product, that have a better yield as far as bubble hash and those types of things. So there's some things that people love the flower of a particular flower, and we might bring it to the solventless lab, and it produces a product that's just not that great. It doesn't smell that great. The color's not that great. So but we're trying new strains all the time, but there is particular favorites that say, okay, we know that our Jenny Kush A produces a high yield, but B produces a stellar product that people love. So that is absolutely a driver in the types of things that we're cultivating.
Yeah, also the side note is that, our retail demand really drives a lot of this. So, our retails will report back to us and say, hey, you guys, the market is really hungry for sativas right now. Let's pump up our sativa index, so that brings us back to our tissue culture lab. We select our cultivars and then start to commercialize those strains. So a lot of that feedback comes from the retail. They kind of give us a hit list of what strains they want or what direction they want to go in, and then we fill in those gaps. So.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. So we probably have a few more minutes. I know we started a couple minutes late, by the way. Thank you to the audience for being patient. We had a couple of technical issues totally my fault. So let me just ask you one more question, which is, I think, is pretty important from what I understand to your operation. Can you talk about the biocontrols that you're using and why they're so important?
Yeah, the biocontrols are critical. It's not just important. That what this entire operation pivots off of. So there is a lot of technology that we use for our biocontrols, but also a lot of it has to do with our protocol. You know, we have just really trained and told all of our employees and really ingrained it into the culture of this place that everything has to be incredibly clean, top to bottom, as soon as you come in. And even, you know, out living in your life outside of this facility, there's some responsibilities that people have to take in order to protect this place, as far as being involved in other cultivations and as far as that goes. But inside the facility, you know, you can see we're wearing scrubs. I mean, you can see just a small background here, and you know, just the cleanliness. That the whole facility, you know, is more or less a giant clean room, and that's really important. The mechanicals is huge too, as far as the filtration and the biocontrols that go into making sure that there's no bacteria or mold floating around, or there's no contamination in any of our water or our nutrient. I mean, it's one of our largest overarching goals is to keep this place as absolute clean as possible. And you know, it's our test results are a testament to that. We have the highest test pass rate in the state. I mean, we're in the high 99 percentile. That's something that you rarely see or don't see really anywhere.
Yeah, the definitely a testament to it, you know. And the other thing is that we really have the end user in mind. You know, we're not only enthusiasts, we love what we do, but we strive to be the best, and we want our finished product to show that. And all the work and effort we put into this, I want to show in that finished retail ready flower that gets to the store. You know, and it's a win-win for us and the customers. You know, we don't want pests inside the facility, and customers don't want hair inside their flower. So we make sure that we follow the protocol strictly, and you know, it's worked out really well for us. The proof is in the results.
Yeah, and you know, I'm glad you brought that up. So as consumers ourselves, we don't want to see microbials, mold, bacteria, chemicals, pesticides, those types of things on our flower that we consume. And we're fortunate enough to have such an amazing company and facility at our disposal to be able to implement things where we don't have to do that. And when I say test results, and as far as keeping that clean, you know, that gives you great microbial results, but they also test for a very huge list of chemicals and pesticides, and we're non-detectable across the board. And the only way we're able to do that is by having the right protocol and infrastructure to keep it incredibly clean. And like he said, with the end user, you know, as much as we'd want to run through these rooms in our street clothes and frolic in there and then grab flowers and smell every one of them and squeeze them into our nose, you know, we don't, you know, none of these buds will ever touch a human skin until it gets to the end user. And that's so when someone opens up that jar or that can, that's the first skin that's ever had contact with that plant. And you can be confident for us, you know, that it got there clean. We didn't have to put all these nasty things on it to get it to the finish line. You know, it's all on the preventative side.
Great. So I think we'll take, if you don't mind, take a few questions from the audience now.
Sure.
We've got a bunch that came in. I'll just kind of pick and choose. So this was kind of something I'm interested in as well. Do you let your data drive your control system kind of without human interaction? Like how much human input?
We were just having this conversation, you know, not too long ago. It's you know, we're getting to the time of machine learning with cannabis. You know, we're approaching that, and to me, it's one of those things where it'll never be fully machine. You'll always have to have a combination, but in my mind, it's going to be a combination of the two. And we're going to try to be at the forefront of that as far as technology goes. You know, our HMI and our operating system that we have outside each grow room that controls everything. That's our custom unit that we got to design and create, and it handles everything in the room. You know, that also collects data for us, and that has been an absolute critical component to how we move forward. You know, so yeah, great question.
Yeah, a lot of the data collecting is done automatically. I mean, pretty much all of the data collecting is done automatically, but actually digesting that information into something useful is something that we play a huge part in. I mean, you know, the controls, they can pump you out a pretty graph, you know, but it's not going to tell you what to grow, but it's going to tell you a story. But we take that story and we use it to drive our business decisions.
Okay, great. So you talked about before that, if you kind of know what you're doing with LEDs, they really can take you and your operations to the next level. So someone's asking, what are the keys to properly using LEDs and getting them to work to their full advantage?
Yeah.
Or what would you recommend?
Yeah. So understanding the spectrum is really important. Understanding the diodes and how they fire and electricity is really important. It's also really important to, specifically for cannabis, know how the plant reacts to different spectrum throughout the plant's life. So it's also really important to tie in that with your nutrient recipe and not keep those two isolated from each other. So you have to be able to manipulate one to the other a little bit just to get it to that basically that perfect symbiosis. They have to work hand in hand. Just putting an LED fixture up, it doesn't mean it's going to produce you results right off the bat. There's other things that you have to consider in order to really push you to that next level.
Yeah, exactly. Increasing leaf temperature, is going to be one of the main things. The PPFDs are typically higher with LEDs, so the plant's going to be able to absorb more light energy. That means it's typically going to use more nutrients.
I think you may have died there.
Oh, we lost you for a second, Kevin.
Let me check. Oh, still on.
Can you hear me now?
I got you now.
Yep.
Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, no, I was just saying that with LEDs that they typically have higher PPFD than an HPS light. So not only did you need your leaf temperature higher, but you also need to understand that plant is going to be absorbing more light energy, and it'll be absorbing more nutrients at that time to be able to take that on. So like he said, it's a symbiotic relationship, and dialing those three things in to me are the main controls, right? You have the spectrum, you have the light intensity, and then the controls in the room to make sure it can handle that increased metabolism and evapotranspiration rate.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that we've really been able to excel with, because we've been fortunate enough to have the support and be well funded enough to change the mechanics in our rooms. It's really hard to get it right, and it's really expensive to change anything infrastructure wise, mechanic wise in a facility. I mean, it's insane. But we have, like I said, we've been fortunate. We change something and we say, hey, we need to change this other thing to make that work correctly. And everybody works together to get it in place, and it rolls out smoothly. It's really an amazing thing.
Got the support.
Great. So I'm going to ask this question. I know our sponsor will love it, and it came in. What made you decide to go with Fohse lights? What do you think is better about them? Why did you choose them?
I mean, to me, I test everything. Like I said before, we're a data-driven company, and I wanted to see it. So, like I mentioned before, we tested over a dozen LEDs all the way through flowers. So to me, I got to see it. It has to be proved to me. And that was this light just outperformed every other light that we tried.
Yeah, and we've worked hand in hand with them quite a bit. Even facilities before this facility, and they take our feedback to heart, and they visited our facility and showed up with experts, and helped us transcribe some of the data and help us push things over the finish line. But when we're like, hey, we don't like the spectrum that this light pulls out, they show up a few months later with a prototype.
Yeah, that's a huge piece of it, right? Not just a company that'll just give you a light and say good luck on your way, but they're there to help you and walk you through it. And all the things that I've mentioned, they're well versed on because we worked through these problems with them. So yeah, that's a critical piece to a lighting company as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I'm going to go a couple minutes over, if you guys don't mind, just because we started a couple minutes late. I just have one last question for each of you. So Kevin, this is your 14th state licensed grow, I believe, that
Yep.
you've helped build out and oversee. Can you share maybe like one or two of your top lessons learned about cultivating high quality, high yielding cannabis at scale? I mean, you're obviously doing a very large space and continuing to grow, and you've built out some massive spaces too. So
absolutely. To me, there's a couple points that really hit home. One is surrounding yourself with the right people. You have to know and really truly believe that you don't know everything, but if you're eager enough and you want it bad enough, surround yourself with people that are on the same mindset or that can contribute in their own way. will help you on that path and get you there faster. So making sure you have the right people around you is absolutely critical. And then, like I mentioned before, you know, approaching problems and situations not with you know, an ego, but with knowing that there's a better way out there, and always, you know, trying to work towards a greater accomplishment. And you know, like my mom says, if you approach it with honesty, humility, and heart, the answer is going to be there. So, you know, that's a kind of a motto we try to stick to. And you know, to me, those are two of the main things that I would focus on and have really been a contributing factor to my success. It took me a while to learn the first one, but once I got that down, it's helped.
I think it takes us all a while to learn that, right?
Yeah.
So Marlin, you worked, as did Kevin, at the biopharmaceutical cannabis company GB Sciences, but you also worked, I have to circle back to this, in subsea construction for Morrison Energy. Are there any lessons you carried over from that experience that apply in cannabis?
Absolutely. And that's, I mean, that's a loaded question. I could probably go on for days about the lessons I learned out there, but I would say a couple of the big ones that applied to this industry specifically is it gave me a really well-rounded understanding of really the physics and the mechanics and how those types of things work, because that's a huge piece of cultivation in general. It's knowing how everything in the room operates. It's not just knowing that the HVAC cools the room and maybe it pulls some moisture out of the air. It's knowing how and why, and you know, and when things break down, you know, you might not be able to fix every little thing, but you can really determine what the problem was, or if something's not performing correctly and it's doing what it's supposed to, but it's just not right. Why is it not doing that? And how do you tweak it to make it get where it needs to be? So that was a big thing that I took from that, because what I was dealing with was things that support life. You could not fail. Everything was to the letter. You can't mess up a decimal, or that's somebody's life that's at stake. So that in conjunction with learning the mechanics and the understanding. And so the other big thing that I got from that industry really is work ethic. I mean, back in those days, you know, before I got into the cannabis world, you know, I would do 18-hour days, 7 days a week for weeks and weeks and weeks, you know, and so it was like bringing that into this industry and having that work ethic and having that drive, I think is a huge piece of it as well. But the last thing I would say is being able to get along with all kinds of personality types. You know, you have to be able to bring that together. All people are different. Everybody has their quirks and tweaks. And, you know, I tell this to people around here, you know, I can be a little forward sometimes, but, you know, you're not going to see me walking around this place yelling at anybody. You know, I try to do my best to make sure everyone's getting along with each other the best they can. You know, when I was doing that type of work, I'd see the same 30, 40 people 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. You know, it's like you learn to be patient with yourself. You learn to be patient with other people. And, you know, and most of all, you learn how to work as a team.
Yeah, the vibe is absolutely critical. And that's the other thing we love about having Marlin here is the guy spent weeks and weeks, you know, 1,000 feet below sea level, welding all day underwater, and then slept in a capsule eating peanut butter and jelly. We know he can handle the pressure.
I can imagine. Well, guys, we are out of time. I know there's some questions we didn't get to, but Kevin, Marlin, thank you so much for being here with us and sharing your stories and your insights about your facility and your operations. So really appreciate you being here. And I just want to thank our sponsor, Fohse, again, for making this possible so that we could have you here. And thank everyone for attending. And our next Grower Spotlight interview will be on April 27th. And it's with Rob Baldwin of Pure Sun Farms up in British Columbia. So we're excited about that. So again, thank you guys so much. Really great to see you and have you here.
Thanks for having us on. Appreciate it.
Thank you.